The Department of Homeland Security manages the country's immigration system. Once Border Patrol processes people, they usually transition into the custody of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Overseeing enforcement and removal proceedings in Arizona is Henry Lucero. We spoke to him at ICE headquarters in Phoenix.
ICE will assume custody of those individuals and either place them in our detention locations or make them eligible for a bond or place an ankle monitor on them for release.
The influx that we're currently experiencing, are those individuals classified under the same that you typically see throughout other times during the year?
This is nothing new. This is what we've seen over the last 21 years that I've been doing this job. The difference that is happening now is there's more volume of family units. That is mom, dad with minor children.
With respect to when children are involved, I understand there's a settlement that is in place for 20 days. So at that point, the children or the family units must be removed from federal custody. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the Flores settlement is in regards to children. It limits how long they can stay in an ICE family residential center, which is approximately 20 days. It does not limit them when they're unaccompanied and in the custody of Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is where unaccompanied children are housed going through the immigration proceedings before they're kind of delivered to a sponsor or a family member. But when they're accompanied by their parent, they can be detained by ICE at a family residential center, and that's where those limits of 20 days come into apply to the Flores settlement. You know, this is a loophole that many family units have figured out, that smugglers are kind of selling a dream. Particularly in Arizona, most of the families that are being apprehended by Customs and Border Protection are coming from Guatemala. About 85% of them come from that country.
So perhaps the messaging is that if you have a child with you, you'll be able to stay together. Is that correct?
The message is if you're arriving with a child, it's very unlikely that you will be detained by ICE. It's very likely that you'll be released. ICE, and what we do, we have a higher probability of repatriating someone if they're in custody and they're going through the process while they're in custody. Now, when they're released, they still have to go through the process. They're just doing it in a non-detained setting, which could take several years till they come to the completion of their case.
You mentioned placing an ankle monitor on some of these individuals. Is that everybody, mom, dad, child, who will then be released with that?
That's only on an adult, so it's the mother or father. If they have no medical conditions, we have some criteria. They are placed with an ankle monitor. They are served specific paperwork asking them to report to an ICE office within 1 to 2 weeks. They have to check in whatever destination they're traveling to, and then they have to promise to appear in court and to check in at multiple avenues to ICE offices to make sure they're complying with our restrictions. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed to break U.S. law. If they do those things, they're subject to detention and violating their terms of release. If they cut the ankle monitor off, they're also subject to prosecution by the federal government for destruction of government property and hindering removal efforts.
To your knowledge, have you had instances where people have removed their ankle monitors?
Yes, we have. Particularly, it's rising in the class of family units altogether. Not necessarily do they cut them within our jurisdiction here in Arizona. I would say 95% of the people that are apprehended, the families that are apprehended, are traveling outside the state of Arizona. Very few are staying here. So where we see ankle bracelets being cut off are generally at their destination that they're going to live in, like North Carolina, Florida, Texas, wherever they're traveling to. When they get there is oftentimes where they cut it, which falls in a different jurisdiction for prosecution.
I've had a variety of customs officers, ICE officers, Border Patrol agents tell me that the moment someone comes on U.S. soil and requests asylum, they're sort of legitimized in the process because as a government we do process them and they are given a time and a place to report to. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say there's due process involved if you make that claim. That is a system. It's a system that if you're not in custody is very long. If you're in custody, it could be a very fast process comparative to single adults that don't have family. We have people that make that claim every day, and generally they're only in custody less than 30 days. A full adjudication of their case down to an immigration judge. Of course, they have the right to appeal that, so some people stay longer. but we do know that if people are detained, the process happens at a much faster pace than not being in custody. I think that people need to know that our current system needs a legislative fix, that the reason this problem is continuing to increase is because it's well known now about the Flores settlement, the 20 days, that ICE doesn't have the capacity to detain family units, and we've only seen the numbers increase at dramatic fashions. And so until there's some type of fix to the Flores settlement, a capacity issue for ICE, I think the problem will likely continue.